Welcome back to The Mindful Way with Tom and Heather. Today's episode is going to focus on something that I don't think or a relationship that we often overlook, and that's the relationship we have with ourselves. A lot of times you might find that you treat others in a very different way than you would treat yourself.
Yeah.
And we're going to dive into that a little bit and unpack it.
When I was in my early 20s, I was reading an interview with Diane von Furstenberg, and she said something to the effect of, you have to be your own best friend. And to me at the time, that was a really new idea. I had never heard anyone put it that way before. And I think there's such a powerful lesson there in this idea of being our own best friend. We spend every moment with ourselves. We can't really escape ourselves. And it's truly a relationship to nurture. And I think we spend a lot of time looking outward at our relationships with our partners and relationships with coworkers or family and all that stuff. And of course, all that's important too. But our relationship with ourselves is kind of that foundation, that base.
Yeah, it's the grounding of all of that other stuff. And I think when I think of the relationship with myself, I think of two different parts of it. One goes back to self-trust, which is a lot of what we talked about in an earlier episode. And it's the relationship I have with myself in the big picture of what is unfolding in my life. But the other is how I speak to myself, or like how I speak to myself in the moment.
Yes.
You know, those are two distinct ways that you can categorize this topic. And I think most of us, especially the way we talk to ourselves, it's fascinating because I'm sure you might have heard this before, but like if you were to talk out loud to yourself the way that, if you were to talk to yourself the way, or I should say, if you were to talk to somebody else out loud the way you talk to yourself.
If you talk to a best friend the way sometimes we criticize ourselves and we don't even realize we're doing it.
It would be jarring. People would be like, what? But we're all okay with being really, really critical. And I'm definitely very, very, very critical of myself. But I sometimes I struggle personally because it can feel productive for me to be critical in a way. Sometimes I don't know. This is something that Heather and I talk about, and I definitely it's a challenge.
Well, some of it can fuel you, but it can also hold you back and hurt you at times.
Yeah. You want to be kind to yourself, but also sometimes you want to motivate yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like finding that space where you're still able to respect yourself. In your own way, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and the way you treat yourself, it impacts how you show up in the world, how you show up with your partner or with your family, with friends, in the workplace. It has such a ripple effect on everything around you. So being your best friend, what does that really mean? And you don't have to think of it that way. It could just be like being an advocate for yourself. But the first thing really is just tuning in and paying attention. And that's where, like you were saying, Tom, with the thought, the way we kind of criticize ourselves, we don't even have that awareness sometimes. Even just simply becoming aware, you're having a tough day and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, I'm thinking really critical thoughts of myself. Like, oh, you shouldn't have said that to that person. What's wrong with you? You idiot. Like, we don't even realize sometimes how we talk to ourselves. So I think just even tuning in and being like, ooh, I'm feeling this way can be the first part of it. And then the second part of it is what would make me feel taken care of today? So like, what do I actually need today? Do I need time with a friend? Do I need time on myself? Do I need to go out and do something fun? Do I need to go read a book? Whatever it is. So I think the tuning in part, I know we talk about this a lot too, but there's just so many nuances to it. And it's just such an important thing to do.
Yeah. I had a coach who framed the voice inside my head as a little child version of myself.
Yeah.
I think we went to like first grade, kindergarten realm.
Yeah.
And it was powerful to see the voice in my head as a separate part of me.
Yeah.
Sometimes we identify very strongly with the things that are going on in our heads. And I think it's good to get some space from it.
Exactly.
And that
yes.
The story or the voice is doing its best to protect
you.
But may not be doing it in the most optimal way. So, what we talked about was framing the voice and not necessarily resisting or pushing back at it, letting it speak, but then, but okay, thank you. And moving on, kind of letting it happen, letting the voice sometimes come through, but not identifying so strongly with it.
Yeah, just recognizing it is like the first step in having some sort of awareness. We're not going to be aware all the time. And it's not like we're going to be able to stop it. Like you're saying, it's a protector, part of us. But I think just having that awareness in the smallest way is a huge first step. And being your own best friend is really obviously a broad thing and can look very different for everyone. I also really love the idea with this that I think sometimes we expect other people sometimes to read our minds, which is so human. I definitely expect you to read my mind.
Often expects that.
A, like, of course, people can't read our minds. And B, it's kind of an unfair expectation because it's just not possible. And I think there's something really beautiful about realizing that there's only so much the external world can do to support us. You really have to be able to do that for ourselves. So yes, of course, we all need support. We all need people around us that love us and care for us and care about us. But in the end, it's up to you to really take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And that idea of like, okay, well, what does that mean? What does that look like for me? So I think that's really a powerful thing for me as far as being best friend. That was a shift in my life when I realized like, oh, wait, I don't have to wait for anyone else, or it's really about like me showing up for myself in this way and putting myself first, which feels really uncomfortable sometimes and like it's a selfish thing to do, but it's truly not, because it's essential. And I think a lot of these things will show up, like the frustration and the sort of shame or whatever, if we don't do it.
Yeah, I think especially if you frame it from the context of like, you can only be as good to others as good as you are to yourself. Meaning you first have to start with creating a space for you to feel grounded before you can actually go out there and help other people. And I think sometimes we put a lot of our own effort, or we put a lot of effort into trying to please others in order to make others, feel seen or whatever, that we forget that first, to do that in a way where maybe we aren't resentful, or we come at it from a perspective of positivity, you really need to first feel like you've got your own back, right?
Yes.
And that is again often left behind and not talked about.
And it doesn't mean that, again, I want to just reiterate that like we don't need other people. It's not about like I'm independent and I never ask for help, because that's a whole other conversation for another day. But I think it's just realizing that if we wait for other people to sometimes show up in the ways we want them to, they might not do it. It doesn't mean they don't care. It just means that
we need to show up for ourselves in the way we want us.
Yeah, when you tune into what you really need, then you can actually try and create a solution there for yourself, if it is going for the walk or saying no to plans or whatever it is. Where if we wait for other people to do that, we might be waiting forever. So,
and this isn't a selfish act.
Well, they know you.
This is really like one of those wonderful things in life that has a dual benefit. Meaning, when you take care of yourself, you also take care of others. So it's not like you take care of yourself and you neglect others.
No,
you can show up for others in a way that will be better than you could ever have showed up for them.
Yeah, I think it gives you a greater capacity for grace and empathy when you have that sort of space for yourself to do that for other people. And that's a really beautiful thing.
I think it's important to recognize that you are not the voice inside your head. And for some people, that might be a really unique thought that may not be something that you've ever touched on before. I remember the first time I heard someone say that, I was like, what? Like, of course I'm the voice inside my head, right? But then when you really sit on it, you realize that like, you are the observer of the voice in your head. And the voice in your head changes. Some days it's happy, some days it's angry.
We don't have a lot of control over it.
You have no control. In the same way that you have no control over what your next thought is going to be. If you're sitting there, sometimes a thought just pops in your head and you really didn't control that. These voices are the same thing.
Yeah.
So paying attention, sometimes they tell you things that you maybe will push you in a direction, but a lot of times they're just trying, like we said before, trying to protect you. It's not, you just want to be careful that you don't identify strongly with it, because that is detrimental to your own mental health, really.
Yeah, and that's something we can dig into more, because that's definitely a deeper topic about the idea of kind of
the illusion of the self.
Yeah.
We'll get into that at another date. Might be a little deeper right now.
And I think if you're struggling with something and feeling a lot of criticism and not sure, say, like what decision to make for something you're dealing with in your life, looking at it also is like, what would you say to your best friend or a best friend? What would you tell them if they were in this position? It helps us to shift out of our own mind for a second and go, oh, of course, I would tell them this and this. And so sometimes that's your answer right there when you're so stuck on something. That's another beautiful way of being our own best friend. It's kind of seeing how would we talk to someone else about something, or what's the solution we would come up with.
Yeah, definitely. So, taking care of yourself isn't a luxury. It's really a beautiful, productive, generous thing that you can do. And it's all part of this bigger picture of, really going inward, which I think is just a real important theme in this day and age more than ever, is to really look inward, because there's so much noise everywhere. We need to get back to like our roots. And part of that is listening to the way we interact with the most important person in our lives.
Most important relationship.
One of the most, I would say that it's the most important relationship.
The most important.
Yeah, because it precedes every other relationship.
Yeah. So if you want to reflect on this more, maybe journal about it, something you could consider is, what does being my own best friend look like today?
I know for a lot of people that thought probably is very like intense, you know, like thinking of themselves, their own best friend is like, that would be like a jarring thought, right? It could be like,
you're right. Yes.
Like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, no, I can't be my own best friend. Like, I'm the one that's trying to gets always angry at me for not doing none more, or, you know, whatever. So it's like,
and that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
That's a great, I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes these things can be like, oh, I don't even know where to start with that. So being your own best friend could be cooking a home cooked meal tonight, a healthy meal that, you know, you're going to feel good after you cook it. It could be listening to music that you love when you go for a run. It could be calling a friend. It doesn't have to be anything that costs money or anything. It's a simple thing you do that makes you feel good.
Remember, at the end of the day, you and that little voice inside your head both want the same thing.
Yeah.
Deep down. And I think finding ways to align with each other, which sounds strange because it sounds like you're talking to somebody else, but you kind of are. But anyway, finding ways to align or at least soothe each other, because you may not always be on the same page, is just a wonderful thing to do for yourself.